This is my first time speaking in South Carolina, so I bring you greetings from Florida, down in Tampa way. So it is very nice to have an opportunity to be here with you guys today. Many of you may have heard your parents say at some point in your life, remember to brush your teeth. Remember to take out the trash. I remember to start my timer. Remember to wash your hands. Remember, don't chew with your mouth open. And remember, don't stay out too late. Well, you know, God the Father has the same sayings to us. He tells us things such as, remember to keep his Sabbath. Remember his covenant. Remember coming out of Egypt. Remember all of the things that he's done for us. Remember to silence your cell phones. And you know, it's funny, these things don't change as we get older, do they? I mean, I know my wife tells me all the time to take out the trash and I forget. Or we tell them to take out or shut the cell phones off and we don't remember. But you know, the word remember in the Bible occurs 148 times. And dictionary.com's definition of the word remember is very interesting because it means the word implies, remember, that a thing exists in the memory, though not actually present in the thoughts at the moment. And I'm going to give you an example. I have to take out the trash, right? So it existed in my mind at the moment, and I knew I had to take out the trash. But it wasn't present in my thought at the moment, so I didn't take out the trash. So the opposite of the word remember is, of course, to forget. So again, I forget a lot of things, especially as we get older. But the Greek definition of the word remember is even more interesting than the dictionary definition because it means to exercise the memory. It means to rehearse or be mindful or bear in mind. Now, I think of exercise, I think of a lot of work, right? I mean, you go to the gym, you want to work out. I know round is a shape, but it's not the shape that you want to be in. But it takes a lot of work, and that's what remembering does, because as humans, we tend to forget a lot of things. Well, there's one phrase of the word use of the word remember in the Bible that I'd like to talk to you about today. And we're going to see how this actually ties into the spring holy day season. And it will also see how we can avoid this same reminder to remember. So let's turn to our Bibles, if you would, over to Luke chapter 17. Luke 17. And here Christ is speaking about the events that are happening at the time of the end. And he refers to the days of Noah and Lot. You know, things were just going on just as they normally were. You know, you look about life today, and isn't the same thing happening today? The world is just going on and people just seem to just don't care about things. They forget. And they've put God on the back burner. And they take him out of the schools. They've taken him out of all the things that we have that are so important. And people are forgetting God. This is what was happening back in the days of Noah and Lot. So Luke 17, verse 29. It says, but the same day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. And thus even it shall be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. In that day, he which is on the housetop and his stuff in the house, let him not come in and take it away. And he that is in the field, let him likewise not return back. And then he gives this little 3-word phrase in verse 32. He says, remember Lot's wife. And if you want a title for my message today, it's just that. Remember Lot's wife. It's a very powerful and very curious statement. We're found here to specifically remember someone and something that somebody did. This phrase is directly correlated with the events that are leading up to the tribulation and the end of our physical age. So what is it that we have to remember? Well, we have to go back to the original account in Genesis 19. I put in my notes, what is it that we need to remember or not to forget? And just as a recap here in Genesis chapter 19, God knew that Sodom and Gomorrah was a wicked place. And he went and he told Lot, he says, I'm going to destroy it. And he says, but Lot bargained with him and says, well, if you find 50 people that are righteous, would you save the city then? And God says, yeah. 40, 30, 20, got it down to 10. 10 people. So he sends out the angels to Sodom and Gomorrah, and he tells Lot and his wife, you need to get everybody, all your family, and you need to leave. And of course, some of Lot's kids looked at Lot and thought he was crazy, kind of like my kids look at me sometimes. Hi, guys. But the angels told them that they were going to leave. And they said, get out, you need to leave right now. And God was showing Lot and his family mercy. He was showing them a way out, a way of escaping, so that they didn't have to be destroyed and be killed with everybody else in the city because it was so wicked. Genesis 19, verse 24. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew the cities and the plain and all the inhabitants of the city, and they that which grew up in the ground. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. This is exactly what Jesus was referring to back in Luke chapter 17 when he says to remember Lot's wife. Now, there's two schools of thought about Lot and why she might have looked back. The first school of thought is, number one, she might have looked back because she left some of her family behind. Maybe she missed her family, her kids. I mean, that's logical. But she looked back nonetheless. The second school of thought about her going back was that Lot's wife looked back because she was longing for the way that things used to be. The good old days. Thayer's Hebrew lexicon seems to favor this opinion in the way that it defines the phrase looked back. It means to look intently at, to regard with pleasure, favor, or care. Lot's wife looked back because she didn't really want to leave. She would rather have stayed and enjoyed the pleasures of her physical life than to escape the evil and the wickedness that was there. Now, salt is interesting because this is symbolic of something that is enduring. God turns Lot's wife into a pillar of salt as a perpetual symbol of one who was not willing to completely and permanently forsake him and submit to him. I'm going to read that again. Salt is a perpetual symbol of one who is not willing to completely and permanently forsake him and submit to him. That's a powerful statement. So why are we to remember Lot's wife? Brethren, her example is a warning for us to leave and not return to the temporary pleasures of sin that this evil life has to provide for us today. For when we were baptized and we were called into God's family, we had forsaken that. That old man or that old woman was to stay down in that grave. We're not to go back there. We need to leave like Lot's wife, or not leave like Lot's life didn't, and going back to that old way and to do it with the right attitude. So what does this mean for us? I mentioned that this is kind of symbolic around the holy days and the spring holy days. Physically, we know ancient Israel was saved from slavery, from Egypt, from coming out of, from slavery, from their days that they were there, during the days of unleavened bread. And it represented the sin and the evil that they were living in at the time. Lot and his wife were freed from the bondage of Sodom and Gomorrah. And again, God has called us out of this world. And again, looking back can cost us our eternal life. And we just kept the Passover a few weeks ago. Again, kept picturing the sacrifice that Christ made for us. You know, we had to take out the old and we had to put in what? The new. We had to put in Jesus Christ and replace it. Because we get so filled with our own ways and our own ways of doing things on a day-to-day basis. And when Christ said, remember Lot's wife, well, Lot's wife, like I said, she didn't really care. She wasn't trying to put in Jesus Christ in her life. She just wanted things for herself and do it her own way. Let's go to Philippians chapter 3 as we wrap this up. And I'll ask this question: what is it that we're looking back at? What is it in this world that is so important to us? To me. Because I give this message, I stand up here, this is like a confessional booth for me. This is like looking into my life. Philippians 3, verse 13. Paul says, "Brethren, I count not myself to be apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth to those things which are before." The New Living Translation says, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. And why? Why is it that we have to remember these things? Now, I can tell you, I see just a handful of people here today, but I guarantee you, if you go back 30, 40 years ago, we couldn't have services here because there wasn't enough seats to hold everybody. They forgot. Don't let that happen to you. Don't let that happen to me. I always say, I want to see next Passover and the Passover after that. And I always want to remember those things. Christ told us to specifically remember that, especially as we grow closer to the end time. Excuse me, verse 14. Paul continues, he says, I press towards the mark for the prize. That prize is our crown. That's eternal life. He says, for the high calling of God in Jesus Christ. And Paul here was referring to a runner. Now, I'll have a confession to make. You know, I used to run track back in the old YOU, back in the old days, and I hated it. Not only was I the slowest guy on the field, but it took me away from doing what I really enjoyed doing, that was talking to the girls. Right? But if you're going to run a race, the object of the race is to win. You run to win the race. But you know the other reason you run the race is to finish. Finish. Paul says here, he says, run so that you finish your race, that you don't forget why we're here, why we come to Sabbath services every week. Because they're weekly reminders for God's plan of salvation. They're markers, and they keep us focused on what's important in our life. He says here in verse 15, let us therefore as many be perfect, be thus minded. The NLT says, let all who spiritually are mature agree on these things. And hopefully we're all here today agreeing that these things are important. And that's why we come every week. You know, you can't win a race if you're looking behind you. Every runner runs with their face towards the finish line. Because if you look over your shoulder, you're gonna fall down, or you're not gonna know where you're running to. Brethren, as we begin our journey towards the promised land, towards God's kingdom, let's remember or exercise the memory, rehearse or be mindful of all of the lessons that God has given to us. The lessons that we go through from the days of unleavened bread to Pentecost, that 50 days as we make that count. That's important. It's things that we need to remember because we will forget. And let's do our best each and every day to come out of this world and be like our elder brother, Jesus Christ. And let's stay focused on what's in front of us and finish the race, and always remember Lot's wife.